Hello and welcome to our podcast episode number. Epic monsters clash in a battle for ultimate supremacy. I'm Timothy and I am here with my old friend Thomas. Tonight we are going to talk about a film called Godzilla x Kong. The new empire is always spoilers ahead. Godzilla x Kong. The new empire is an action-adventure film that pits the iconic monsters against each other once again. Godzilla and Kong are forced to join forces when they discover an ancient evil threatening humanity's existence. They must battle not only this powerful foe, but also confront their own inner demons in order to save the world. Well, Tom, did you enjoy Godzilla x Kong?
Well, Timmy, I'm not exactly one for giant monsters smashing cities and all that nonsense. But I will admit, this one was pretty damn entertaining. Sure, it wasn't the best written movie ever made. But who cares when you got Godzilla and Kong going toe-to monster? Especially that final battle between them and whatever evil lizard thing was threatening us humans. And I do appreciate a good old-fashioned monsters are actually metaphors for something deeper plotline. Even if it did feel a bit heavy-handed at times. But what really sold me on this one was the humor. That scene where Kong accidentally eats a helicopter and then burps up a whole squadron of soldiers had me in tears, mate. I'd give it a solid out of decent popcorn flick that you can turn your brain off to for a couple of hours. So what about you, Timothy? You usually love your adventure films. Am I right?
I have to say, Thomas, you are right. It was a pretty entertaining film, and I did enjoy myself while watching it. The action scenes were indeed thrilling and well made, though I must admit that the plot felt a bit cliche at times. But like you said, who cares about plot when we got Godzilla and Kong beating the shit out of each other? And I have to agree with you on the humor as well. It was a refreshing change from all the seriousness in most films nowadays. However, there were some aspects that I did not like. Firstly, the CGI felt a bit overused at times and took me out of the immersion a couple of times. And secondly, while I appreciate the message about humanity's role in the world, it was hammered in a bit too much for my liking.
I would give it an 8 out of 10 stars.
Which is pretty good considering my usual taste leans towards more dramatic and character-driven films. So what did you think about Kong's character development throughout the movie?
I think Kong's development was done quite well, actually. We see him go from a naive creature that accidentally eats an entire helicopter to a heroic figure who is willing to fight for his own survival and the survival of others. It was a nice arc that felt natural and believable, considering he's just a big ape after all. And let's not forget about Godzilla's character as well. He starts off as this mysterious force in the shadows, but eventually becomes an ally to Kong, showing us that even monsters can have complex emotions and motivations. Now, speaking of Godzilla, did you find it odd how he was portrayed more like a friend than a foe? He doesn't attack humans at all throughout the film, which is quite different from his usual behavior in other media. Did this bother you, Timothy, or were you fine with it?
No, I didn't find Godzilla's portrayal as a friend bothersome at all. I think it was an interesting twist on the character that made him more relatable and sympathetic to the audience. It allowed us to see him not just as a destructive force, but also as a creature with his own agenda and motivations. And who knows, maybe this version of Godzilla will pave the way for future films where he becomes more of an anti-hero rather than a villain. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human characters in the film. They were pretty much just there to be saved or killed off by the monsters, right? Was there any particular character that stood out to you, or did they all blend together for you, Tom?
To be honest, Timothy, I didn't really care much about the human characters in this film. They were pretty generic and forgettable, with the exception of Ren Serizawa, who is related to the original Godzilla villain doctor. Serizawa from the movie, but even then, her character felt underdeveloped, and her presence didn't really add much to the story. However, I did enjoy some of the side characters, such as the scientist who was trying to communicate with Godzilla, or the military general who seemed more concerned about his men than anything else. These smaller characters added a bit of flavor to the film, but overall, they were still overshadowed by the monstrous titans fighting for our entertainment. So, my question for you is this. What do you think was the main message that the filmmakers were trying to convey with this movie? Was it about humanity's responsibility towards nature or something else entirely?
Well, Thomas, as we discussed earlier, the film is trying to convey a message about humanity's role in the world and how our actions have consequences that extend beyond ourselves. The filmmakers seem to be suggesting that we should take more responsibility for our environment and not just focus on short-term gains. It's an important message, but I do agree with you that it was hammered in a bit too much at times. Moving on to some interesting trivia about the movie. Did you know that Godzilla and Kong were actually redesigned for this film? The studio wanted them to look more realistic and lifelike, so they created new CG models for both creatures. The results are impressive. They look incredibly detailed and believable on screen. Another interesting fact is that the actors who played the main characters in the film, Alexander Skarsgård and Rebecca Hall, had to undergo a lot of training to prepare for their roles. Alexander spent hours learning how to fight like a soldier, while Rebecca practiced horseback riding and archery. It's clear that both actors put in a lot of effort into making their performances as authentic as possible. Finally, if you pay close attention during some of the action scene, you might notice that there are references to other films in the Godzilla and Kong franchises. For example, there's a brief cameo from Mothra, a creature from the original Godzilla series. It's fun to spot these Easter eggs if you're familiar with the history of these iconic monsters. So what do you think about all these trivia, Thomas? Any particular fact that stood out to you?
Well, Timothy, I have to admit that I didn't know much about the redesigns of Godzilla and Kong. It's quite impressive how realistic they look in this film compared to past iterations. And your point about the actors' training is also interesting. It shows how dedicated they were to their roles. The Easter eggs are always a treat for fans like myself who grew up watching these movies. I spotted a few references myself, but I'm curious if there are any others that you know of, Tim. Also, do you think we'll see more crossovers between these two iconic franchises in the future, or was this just a one-off event? And as always, my question for you is, what would be your dream crossover film between any two franchises? It could be anything from superheroes to horror movies. Let your imagination run wild.
Well, Tom, I, for one, would love to see more crossovers between these two iconic franchises. After all, what could be more epic than Godzilla and Kong teaming up against a mutated King Kong, or even going head-to-head with the original 1954 Godzilla? As for my dream crossover film, that's a tough one. I think if we're talking about two completely different genres, it would be a battle royale between the survivors of the Hunger Games and the survivors of Friday the 13th. Can you imagine Katniss and Gale trying to outsmart Jason Voorhees? It would be a bloodbath of epic proportions.
Now back to Godzilla x Kong.
The New Empire, what did you think about the pacing of the film? I personally thought it was well balanced with enough action scenes to keep me hooked, but not so much that it became overwhelming. There were also some nice moments of character development and world building sprinkled throughout. What's your take on the film's pace, Tom?
Well, Timothy, I think the pacing was done quite well considering the movie's runtime. It didn't feel too rushed or dragged on for too long. The action scenes were spaced out nicely with some much-needed breather, moments to catch our breath and process what we just witnessed. As for the actors, I thought they did a decent job given the material they had to work with. Alexander Skarsgård portrayed his character. Dr. Nathaniel Nate Samuels who is a former British soldier turned explorer, pretty convincingly. He brings a certain rugged charm and determination to his role which helps ground the film in some sort of reality even when monsters are smashing cities. Rebecca Hall also delivered an admirable performance as Dr. Jirani J. Kailani, a paleobiologist who specializes in extinct animals. Her character's journey from skeptic to believer adds depth to the story and helps viewers empathize with her plight. Now, let's talk about the two titans themselves, Godzilla and Kong. I'll start with the king of monsters himself, Godzilla. This version of Godzilla is portrayed as a majestic beast, towering over everything in his path. While he still retains his iconic roar and destructive capabilities, this iteration of the character seems more cautious and protective of his territory. His interactions with the human characters, particularly Dr. Serizawa, showcase a more empathetic side to him, which I found quite refreshing. As for Kong, the current king of Skull Island, he's portrayed as a reluctant hero who is forced into action when his home and family are threatened. His fight scenes with Godzilla are epic, but it's in the quieter moments where we see the depth of his character come through. The bond he forms with a young girl named Gia is heartwarming and adds an emotional layer to what could have been just another monster flick. In conclusion, while Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire may not be the most groundbreaking film in terms of storytelling or acting prowess, it's a fun popcorn flick that delivers on its promise of mindless entertainment. The chemistry between Godzilla and Kong is palpable, and their epic battles are worth tuning in for. While the human characters tend to fade into the background, the performances by the main cast are solid enough to keep you invested in their individual arcs. So, Timothy, what's your final verdict on Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire? Would you recommend it to fans of monster movies and action flicks alike? I agree with you, Timothy. It's a fun movie, and I think fans of both Godzilla and Kong franchises will enjoy it. As for other films influenced by Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, there have been quite a few in recent years. One that comes to mind is Pacific Rim, another monster movie where giant robots fight against creatures from another dimension. While the monsters in Pacific Rim don't have the same level of charm and personality as Godzilla or Kong, it does share some similarities in terms of scale and action sequences. Another film that could be considered an indirect influence is The Avengers, Endgame, where two powerful beings clash with each other over the fate of Earth. However, unlike Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, this battle is more about personal vengeance than saving humanity from destruction.
Pacific Rim was indeed a fun film, but I found it to be too chaotic and loud for my taste. It lacked the emotional depth that we see in Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. As for Endgame, I must admit that there are some similarities between Thanos and Godzilla in terms of their power and ambitions. But let's not forget that Endgame is part of a larger franchise with complex characters and story arcs spanning over 10 years. So it's difficult to compare it directly to a standalone monster movie like Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire.
True, but what about the animated series? Are there any that have been influenced by Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire? I remember watching Ultraman when I was younger, and there's definitely some similarities between him and Godzilla in terms of their size and abilities. And let's not forget about the classic anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, where giant mechas fight against monsters called angels. Both of these series have elements that could be considered an influence on Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire.
You're right, Thomas. Both Ultraman and Neon Genesis Evangelion share some similarities with Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, in terms of their themes and characters. But it's important to note that these are animated series, while Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, is a live-action film. Additionally, the animation style and production values are vastly different between the two mediums. However, I do agree that they have had some influence on each other over the years.
So overall, we can say that there have been many films and TV series influenced by Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, in one way or another. Whether it's through similar themes of giant monsters fighting for survival, or simply borrowing elements from each other's narratives, these works are all connected in some way. And I think this is a testament to the enduring popularity and impact that Godzilla and Kong have had on pop culture over the years.
Truly, Thomas, they are indeed cultural icons that transcend generations and continue to captivate audiences with their epic battles and larger-than-life personalities. And I look forward to seeing how these two titans will continue to influence future films and in TV series in the years to come. So, with all this being said, what's your final verdict on Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire?
Would you recommend it to fans of monster movies and action flicks alike?
And with that question, let's wrap up today's discussion.
Well, Timothy, after all our discussions and arguments about the film, I think we can agree that Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, is an entertaining flick for fans of monster movies and action flicks alike. It might not have a groundbreaking story or Oscar-worthy performances, but it delivers what audiences want: epic monster battles and a few emotional moments along the way. While I personally enjoyed the CG effects more than the human characters, I can see how some viewers might find them forgettable after the credits roll. As for my final verdict, I'd give Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, a solid 7 out of 10 stars. It's not perfect, but it does its job of providing mindless entertainment in a world that often feels too chaotic and serious. So if you're looking for a popcorn movie to watch with some friends, I recommend giving this one a try. And with that, let's wrap up today's discussion on Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. Timothy, do you have any final thoughts or recommendations before we sign off?
Well, Thomas, I must say that even though we disagree on some aspects of the film, it was a pleasure discussing it with you today.
As for my final thoughts on Godzilla X Kong,
The New Empire, I echo your sentiments. While the human characters could have been developed further, the monsters themselves are what really steal the show. The CG effects are impressive and the action sequences are well choreographed, making it an enjoyable film for fans of the genre. As for my rating, I'm giving Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, a solid 8 out of 10 stars. It's not the masterpiece some might have hoped for, but it delivers on its promise of action and spectacle. If you're looking for a popcorn flick to watch with friends or just want to zone out after a long day, this is definitely worth checking out.
so my dear viewers, what did you think about our discussion today?
Did we convince you to give Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, a shot? Let us know in the comments section below.
Remember to like, share.
And subscribe to our channel for more film discussions and reviews. And don't forget to leave your own thoughts on this movie and any others you'd like us to talk about next time around. Until then, enjoy your day, night, and see you in our next video.